Good afternoon, and welcome to Praxis Peace Institute's Friday afternoon program. I'm Georgia Kelly, the director of Praxis. Today, we are thrilled to host a longtime favorite of mine and of Praxis, Frances Moore Lappe. She has spoken live in Sonoma twice for our events and also at our conference in 2007 in Dubrovnik, Croatia. Frances Moore Lappe is the author or co-author of 21 books, many focusing on themes of living democracy. She is the author of Diet for a Small Planet, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with. And this was updated on its 10th anniversary, the 20th anniversary, and again on its 50th anniversary. And I have a copy of this, and I highly recommend getting the update of the 50th anniversary. It has new chapters in it that'll just knock your socks off. It's a great book. New recipes as well in the back. So I highly recommend it because it's updated thinking and really important. So that's her books, as probably you know, especially Diet for a Small Planet, has never been out of print. So it's been one of the more important books, I guess, from the 20th century and now going into the 21st. And some of her other books include Daring Democracy, Democracy's Edge, Getting a Grip, and her most recent publication is Crisis of Trust: How Can Democracies Protect Against Dangerous Lies? Frances also received the Right Livelihood Award, which is considered the alternative Nobel Prize, for revealing the political and economic causes of world hunger and how citizens can help remedy them. She has received 20 honorary doctorates from distinguished institutions around the country and has been a visiting scholar at UC Berkeley and at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And of course, I could go on for hours, but I won't. So welcome, Frankie. It's great to have you with
Uh,
us today.
oh, thank you, Georgia. What an intense pleasure to be with you and your friends. So I've got chills of joy.
Well, thank you. I remember and have such fond memories of us in Dubrovnik. I know it's been 18 years, hard to believe, but it was a wonderful experience there, and it was wonderful to have you there for that week. So the first question I want to ask you, you have been fighting the good fight for a long time, whether it's eating for health and a sustainable planet, protecting what's left of our very fragile democracy these days, or dealing with solutions to world hunger. You have been at the forefront of serious movements throughout most of your life. So tell us where you are today. What is your focus in September 2025?
Well, I have two really big goals. And one of them is to awaken us to what I'm calling our democracy emergency. That is really a global emergency because autocracies are spreading and democracies are threatened. And so that is one definite goal. But part of it always is putting forth the idea that hope is a form of power. Because if we have hope, it generates energy, it generates ideas, it helps us make friends too. So I want to stress that hope is not for, uh, you know, it's not for wishful thinkers. It is a form of power. And if we look throughout history at the changes, there's something we can point to where somebody stood up, whether it's Rosa Parks or somebody stood up and the ripples were way beyond what any of us could have imagined. So I just want to stress this idea that hope is actually not a cop out, but a form of power. And so I'm focused on this sense of now we're in a democracy emergency, and I could go on about that if you want me to.
Well, I wanted to ask you about disinformation because that's a topic that you're very involved in now and think it's extremely important that we address it. And it's kind of daunting when we consider the impact of social media and kind of a lockstep media also. And it's like there's a great wall that prevents meaningful discourse or even tolerates questions. And this is another thing that I find a lot is that there's certain things you can't talk about or you can't question or put you in some kind of a framework that is not I guess, very acceptable in our society. It's like things that are outside what's called the Overton window aren't really acceptable for discussion. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about disinformation, how it's affecting us, and and how it's really accelerated through social media.
Well, certainly I agree with you. And in my own family, I have people who are voting for Donald Trump, and I believe it's because of disinformation, because they're wonderful people. So I believe that there is this confusion about the notion of free speech, that any notion that we will set some kind of guardrails against lies and disinformation is anti-democratic. This is what we really need to challenge, because I got very interested in a model. I don't Lessons Not Model is one of my theme songs, but at least a country where we can learn so much lessons about disinformation, and that country is New Zealand. And I don't know if you're aware. Are you aware of what they've created there? A broadcast standards authority they have that
No.
has a public website that anybody can go to, and the idea is, if you want to fight disinformation, then you submit that something is being shown or is on the web that is both false and dangerous. And if it is it is proven to be both, then the Broadcast Standards Authority can have it taken down. And so it's very rare that it's taken down. But when I talked to the head of it there, he said he thinks that just having that authority really limits people, because it started with disinformation that led to a very serious um, loss. And so people, knowing that that authority exists, I think, inhibits people from just spouting out stuff. And so it it was really impressive to me. And he is actually called the chief censor. And he said, "Yeah, when I was visiting UK and somebody asked me what my job title was, and when I said that, they went, ah!" And so they've come to deal with that quite openly, that there needs to be a censor when something can actually hurt people. And so it's very rare. It's like, like 1% or some tiny percent, I've forgotten at this moment, but it has to, and then um, they have to then replace that information with actual fact-based information. So it's not just taking something down, but replacing it with something that is actually helpful.
That's very interesting. I did not know about that. But this gets us into the discussion we have about free speech. And a lot of things that are, or they use the cover of free speech when they're actually very dangerous speech, may not be true. And even if it is true, there often is this type of rhetoric that gets people emotionally engaged in a negative way. And it's all protected by what we call, put in quotes, free speech. So this is a problem I think we have in America, is understanding the need for guardrails
Yeah.
versus free speech. Is there anything else you want to say about that in our country?
Well, no, I just agree, but we are so far from that. And that's why I think if all of our listeners or viewers tonight can share and just go to the New Zealand and start talking about it, the freight, excuse me, the classification office, um, and share the idea, because people think of New Zealand as a very democratic country,
Mhm.
and they've had to use that very seldom, because I think once people know that someone's watching, they're much less apt to put out dangerous information. And and also I should add that in their system, that if something is put out that's both false and dangerous, and this classification office nails it that way, then they have to go on and put something on that corrects the mistake.
Mhm.
So it's not just taking it down, but actively correcting the mistake.
Being
And I thought
accountable.
that was really grown up of the, a very mature way of doing it.
Mature, yeah, that's another
All
topic.
transparent, all transparent.
Transparent and accountable. All very important. I also wanted to to a quote that you use in the 50th anniversary edition of Diet for a Small Planet that I really like and want to talk a little bit about it. It was a quote from Einstein. It is theory that decides what we can observe. I love that quote because it really says the bias we bring to anything is determines how much we can see.
Yeah, we can't fight with Einstein. If you quote Einstein, you can go far. So yeah, so that's really become a theme of my life that we have, I call them filters. We all have these filters and we see what we expect to see. Not, and we can get shaken up by new things for sure, but we tend to see through these filters. And if we expect something to be grim or um, not likable, then we'll look for the worst in it, right, to prove our point. So I think that it's been really important to me um, to incorporate that. And I want to underscore again that if you go to our website, smallplanet.org, you can see our report called Crisis of Trust, which we're in the process of updating. But right now, it's still so relevant to the current moment. And I think, and I'd love feedback. It's easy to give us feedback at info@smallplanet.org. And if you think it's valuable and you have ideas to making it better. But crisis of trust is because what is democracy if we don't trust each other? It just can't happen.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about Crisis of Trust because I thought it was a book and I tried to find it and I couldn't find it as a book, but it's on your website. Can you explain?
Yeah, it's a report. It's
Okay.
it's not it's a PDF,
Mm,
it's, but it's very beautifully laid out with photos and stuff. So it's really quite readable.
wonderful.
It's not like a dry report.
Another thing I want to go back to your newest edition of Diet for a Small Planet. The New York Times wrote, Frances Moore Lappe is one of the few people who can credibly be said to have changed the way we eat, and one of an even smaller group to have done it for the better, unquote. And which I really like. You wrote that food system emissions alone would make it impossible to meet the climate targets for limiting global warming that were set at the 2015 Paris Agreement. So this isn't even considering transportation costs, but just food costs, the way our food is produced. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about some of those choices. What does eating sustainably look like? And maybe tell us something about the food systems. I thought there were some very interesting charts in your book about showing how much land was used and how much emissions there are from beef,
Yeah.
from lamb. I mean, I think this is really important for people to understand. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about that.
Oh, well, thank you, Georgia. Yeah, I was just amazed. I was a kid in my early 20s when I started this. And this meaning Diet for a Small Planet. And it was in response to a book called The Population Bomb. Those of you in our generation might remember Paul Ehrlich's book. And he said that we were overpopulating the earth. And I said, "Oh, that's a good question. I want to say, is that true? Is that true?" And I went to the library then, long before the internet, and I put the numbers together and I realized that no, there's more than enough food for all of us. And we are actively shrinking its capacity at the same time. And what I mean by that is about 80% of our total agricultural land goes to livestock production that return to us about 18% of our calories. And of course, it's our meat production is also implicated strongly in the destruction of the Amazon and other rainforests because they're turning rainforest into pasture and feed crops. So I became what I now call a planetarian because the planet is affected by how the food that we eat, the choices that we make. And then, of course, then I learned the health benefits of plant-centered eating. And so it's a win-win-win, because um, it means that we can all there's plenty of food for all of us, and we can grow it without just having to dump chemicals on it to bring in short-term highest crop because what I'm saying is that we're shrinking the capacity now of the earth to feed us. And if we move to a agroecological way of eating and centered in the plant world. And I'm not saying everyone has to become a planetarian and eschew meat altogether, but this meat at the center of the meal, certainly my growing up in Texas, that was what was understood to be a healthy meal. So I still come back to the food question as very much a question about democracy. Who is making decisions and what are we learning that forms those decisions?
Yes, this has been a very important topic. I think ever since your book came out, a lot of people read it. A lot of people started thinking about their diet and its relationship to the planet. And I don't think, when your book came out in 71, that was before people were really tuned into the climate crisis.
Right,
We did have
right.
our first Earth Day the year before, but for many people, it seemed like a luxury to be focused on the planet and on climate. I mean, this is what it was like 50
Yeah.
years ago. People thought it was kind of what the elite could focus on because they didn't have a poverty problem. So now we've come to full circle where it's a critical problem in our world. And food is a critical part of it. And one of the things that you mentioned too is about small farming, how important small farms are. And the county I live in Sonoma County, we have a lot of local organic farms, which is
Yeah, yeah. You're known for that, right?
um, I guess we are.
Yeah,
I can get everything fresh, and it's really lovely to have
yeah,
it.
yeah. I
And
just wanted to also
sure.
just wanted to add that because few people know this, that the emissions from cattle, they emit when they in their farting, they exude uh, methane, and methane is a particularly harsh, it's particularly damaging greenhouse gas emission, and it makes it's not just the waste that goes into and the chemicals that go in the destruction of the rainforest and all and the shrinking of the capacity to feed us, but there's that extra methane problem that I didn't have any idea of when I first wrote Diet for a Small Planet. And I just want to say also, just personally about shifting my own diet. I grew up in the 50s and 60s, um, always absorbing, always just frantically trying to lose weight and to be trim and to fit the American model of what a woman should be. And you know what? What happened when I moved to a plant-centered diet? I lost a little weight and I have not dieted in all these years is now over 50 years. So I think there's something, maybe I'm odd, but it just felt like, oh, my body was getting what it needed and I didn't have cravings. I just enjoyed eating. I never had to count calories. So I always like to throw that in for people because there's so much dieting and that's just so limiting to your consciousness when you have to worry about calories. So, and anyway, I think there's something just so healthy about centering your diet in plant food, even if you do eat some animal food on the side. Uh, I saw it. That's why I like the planetarian label.
Yeah, I like that label, planetarian. I'm going to call myself that now too. Um, so I wanted to continue with that a little bit because you mentioned in the book about the success of agroforestry in Africa, and I
Mhm.
found this really interesting. It was something I didn't know anything about, and where crops are grown next to trees. Um,
Right.
and I wanted to know, you also said it was happening in the US. And so I'd like you to talk a little bit about where this agroforestry is happening in the US and what kind of trees are compatible with food crops.
Well, I don't know a lot about agroforestry in the US. I do know um, that this is one in the 50th anniversary edition that I was just so in love with this idea that there's not a competition between trees and growing crops, and that trees can actually help uh, because they can help add to the natural fertilizer, but also reduce the heat and the evaporation on some of the land. And so um, I um, I was just so moved by that because I had never, I never understood that. I always, growing up in Texas, all I saw were big, big unit, single crop fields. And yeah, that's really something I need to get back into to look at. But in the new diet, I do in the intro to it, there is a discussion of agroforestry.
I think you mentioned some of it happening in Montana. Um,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Now, the last question I want to ask before I open it up to people who are on the call who might want to ask questions is about solutions to the erosion of our democracy and how people power could move that dial. Because we are now entrenched in the closest thing to fascism that I've seen in my lifetime in this country. And I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. One is, where do you see inflection points? Where might we enter with some kind of power? And where is our power in this? And how do we deal with it? We're up against incredible money power, corporate power, lobbying power, military power. Where do we fit into this to create a more democratic country?
Well, first of all, as we've been saying, it's dropping the notion that we are a democracy leader and to recognize that we rank 57th in the world in the quality of our democracy. Now, that's horrifying, but you know, as I said, that means that there's so much we can learn from all those other democracies up there. And so if we accept that, then we're not complacent, but we want to just jump on it. And so one of the things that I was looking at that I've been trying to get my head around is voter suppression as part of the reason that we rank so low. And that in the last just over a decade, there have been 114 restrictive voting laws that have been passed in 31 states. And um, and just it's very it's also very racially biased. I have here that a voter in Washington State has 5 times more likely to have their mail-in ballot rejected than white voters. And so this this uh, this dropping the notion that we're the best and acknowledging that we can do so much just on saying making auto voter registration an automatic process as it is in a number of states. Um, that is certainly one. And then there just the role of money in our system that is unlike our quote unquote peers. That it's just astounding to me that in 2010, you remember the Citizens United
Mhm.
decision that equated money and speech. And so we've just got to put up the money does not equal speech because obviously then the concentrated wealth can speak louder than the average person or the poor individual. So that completely distorts us away and is the reason that we rank 57th. So to look for all ways that we can um, address the super PAC question um, and can just spread the word. Each of us is a teacher. We all have people we influence, and to tell them that for example, in just last year, that there were 150 billionaires contributed almost $2 billion to in the election cycle. So it's not, as the cliche goes, it's not rocket science. It's pretty straightforward that if you have a money-driven democracy, it's not really a quality democracy. So just to educate our family and friends about all of that, and to note that there are states. For example, in Maine, in '96 they passed a Clean Elections Act, um, and that has really made some difference. That they in 2024, Maine voted to cap the individual contribution to super PACs at 5,000. Still a lot, but it's a lot more fair than in other places. And I got to know a person who was a restaurant. Uh, she was the waiter in a restaurant, and people just really enjoyed her. And they say, "Hey, why don't you run for office?" And she was able to because of this system, and she won. So um, Deb Simpson, what's her name? And so I just think that to look at examples here, another great hero of mine, do you know the name Katie Fahey?
No.
Does that mean anything? Well, Katie, she was just in her 20s when she was alerted to gerrymandering in Michigan, and she helped get a bus campaign that went city to city to city with people educating others about redistricting. And then they created a commission. She helped create a commission for redrawing their partisan gerrymandered, and it got passed by 61% of the voters. And
Mm.
it started with just a woman in her 20s who got fired up about how unfair the map was drawn to advantage one party. So I think the more that we share these stories of possibility,
Mhm.
I think the that hope is power.
Yeah. And these stories are very powerful. As you know, we're in the midst of this whole redistricting debacle right now, and hopefully there will be a balance, but it doesn't look that way. If Missouri and other states are going to be taking this on too, it's disturbing. I don't believe we're in a democracy anymore. So hopefully we can get back to it. There was a couple of other things. Oh yeah, about ads. Here's something that I just want to get your opinion on because I heard it a lot during the last election. People would say, "Well, the ads on TV that these people pay millions of dollars for don't have any effect on them," which of course is not true. And then
Yeah,
you ask them a question, and they spout the exact same thing that the ad said, as if
yeah.
that's so they're not thinking for themselves. They're taking on what they've heard. And this is something that how do you nicely talk to someone who's doing this to point out that it's happening to them?
Well, I think just by sharing your own sources, and I think that no, I mean, I think that most of us don't want to be so grim. And if they meet somebody who has some real fact-based hope behind them, or if they have some, I mean, I think we've got to get beyond any, if uh, signaling any kind of disgust or disapproval, but rather than say, "Oh, did you know this?" And hey, here's a source you can go to, and I trust them for this reason. Really that I think that is the way to go. It's our demeanor. We're not just out there wagging fingers, but we're saying, "Oh, I'm excited about doing this," and people they want to be excited about something. So if they see their friend really positively engaged. And I think that that's contagious. That energy is contagious. And rather than feeling we just have to, you know, convince people intellectually, but I think,
Showing.
just also just telling stories of examples about what is positive happening in the world. And that's a lot of my books are doing that, have
Right.
done.
Certainly are. Wonderful stories in the book and wonderful stories that you've lived through on lots of continents anyway. I want to take some questions. If people have comments or questions they'd like to ask Frankie, this would be the time to do that. Um, if you know how to use the automatic hand raiser, that will be easier for me to see. But if you don't, you can put your hand up like this. I'm looking for people right now. A lot of people aren't showing their faces, so I can't I can't see them. Okay, Fran, go ahead. Fran, you need to unmute. There you go. There you go.
Hi, Frankie. Lovely to see you. Yeah.
Hi,
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, great. You're looking great. That's nice to know.
You.
Um,
And Corton. Oh, hi, Fran.
and
I didn't see your last name.
David
Yay.
here
Oh my
also.
gosh, my old friends.
Come on over. Scoot over.
For everyone else, this is David and Fran Corton.
Yeah. So
My heroes, my heroes.
Yes.
Oh,
anyway,
I miss
we're both
you.
here. Um, Frankie, a question I have is it's about wheat production and basically grain production. So, I have been reading a guy who talks about how the more regenerative approach to grain production is a big mistake because it takes more land. And the last thing we want is to expand the land that agriculture takes when it means like cutting down a forest or, sort of taking over land that otherwise would represent some level of biodiversity. Do you have a view on that?
Well, what takes up so much land is a meat-centered diets that we are pursuing and have pursued because, I was saying that globally, 80% of the land, agricultural land, is used to produce
Mm-hmm.
meat that give us 18% of our calories. So that is where the vast waste is. And, we can feed many more people on acres devoted to everything from legumes and grains and fruits and vegetables and that are integrated into the earth in a way that aren't just monocrops. So
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't imagine that the in terms of, I don't get the logic of that critic.
Mhm.
I think the critic assumes that people are not going to stop eating meat. And therefore, the question of how do you produce the most grain in the least land becomes a key um, uh, question. And his answer is don't try to do it in this, regenerative agriculture kind of way. Yeah. Okay, thanks. Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's kind of
that's a
doesn't seem relevant in a way from the, and I do think people are changing their diets. I don't think it's true that people won't stop eating meat or at least lower their consumption of meat. I think people are doing that, especially young people are definitely lowering their meat consumption. And most people I know are eating very little beef. So I think it is changing all the time.
yeah. The other thing I wanted to point out is that in 2015, the World Health Organization declared a red meat a probable carcinogen, and processed meat like hot dogs we feed our kids as a carcinogen. So there are just multiple reasons that plant-centered eating is a good thing. And I've seen such change over my lifetime in terms of people understanding that there is a meal without meat. I mean, that's, growing understanding of how to create a meal. Um, because I grew up in Texas, as I said, with meat at the center of everything. But I think that just pointing out to people, it's not just that it is an ecological question, it is an efficiency question, but a health question to eat plant-centered, but to really even that meat has been red meat has been deemed a probable carcinogen. That's pretty heavy.
Indeed. Do we have other questions? I wanted to bring the book up again because there are lots of good recipes that are planetarian. Um,
So
I have to
Georgia,
say, my daughter designed that came up with that new cover, and
it's
so.
beautiful. Michelle has
Oh,
a
can
question.
I say,
Oh, go
Anna, my daughter, I learned that the Hindi, the word for food is Anna. So I named my daughter Food. So it's
ahead.
pretty
Yeah.
funny.
Michelle, go ahead.
so Frankie, just a couple of comments. I also lived in Texas 3 different times, and
I'm,
not only is the meat based, but it's the size of the portions.
yeah,
Just unbelievable. But so in the effort of sharing information, I worked many years ago with a journalist named David Weir, and it's Weir. He is
uh-huh.
now in his 80s. David has Parkinson's, and he has his good days and bad days, he says. But he has a fantastic newsletter, and his perspective on what is happening with democracy now, and what he has been through in his lifetime. He was an investigative journalist for many years.
Yeah.
So I'm
Oh,
just his name is easy. It's Weir. David Weir. And if you Google him, you'll find out more what he's done. So
I'm going to put it in the chat box. I see that.
Yeah, thank you. Because I followed him for a while and I've been out of touch. And now I'm going to reach out for sure.
yes,
Thank
yes.
I think Gina has her hand up. Go ahead,
Yes.
Gina.
Hi. I want to share something, then I have a question, but just I was thinking how, yeah, my own daughters, I got 32-year-old twins. They're an example of a generation that is definitely eating less meat. They, I bought the book Diet for a Small Planet when I was in college in the late 70s. So, and it's still sitting on my shelf, although I have to admit I have other cookbooks and haven't looked at it in a while. But, they grew up not eating a lot of meat. We're not vegetarians, but we don't eat much red meat, my husband and I. And then one of my daughters went through a phase where she got intrigued by steak. So that would be a treat on a birthday. And then she went through a period of being a real total vegetarian. And then she kind of backed off from that, but she's still very much light on meat. Both of them are. So I just wanted to validate that issue. But the question, would you fill me in more on kind of the difference in the update book? Um, the updated besides the cover, I love the new cover. I'm trying to decide here whether I should buy the update. What recipe wise particularly is different now than 50 years ago?
Well, it's so much I learned since um, there a whole lot of new recipes, but it really it takes through the journey. My daughter and I worked on it together, and it gives because diet the original was just about the incredible waste built in and more of that, and now we have all these different dimensions in terms of climate change, in terms greenhouse gas emissions, in terms of um, the soil itself, the quality of the soil, the alternatives in agroecology that and so the new book and takes more of an international in the introduction, more of an international look at all the things that are developing, whereas the original was just, oh my God, I was just it was my wake up. But then the story has gotten so much richer as and the recipes are so much more interesting because they build on different cultures, um, so different flavors and different combinations. So it's really um, quite different.
Yeah, I'm not much of a cook, but I can't wait to try the minestrone soup. That just looks
Okay. Yeah,
fabulous.
you can't go wrong. And
Oh,
the thing about I always say about the Diet for a Small Planet is really what it did for me is it liberated me so that I don't know how many of you feel this way already, but I was really tied into recipes and everything. And then when I wrote the book and I realized, oh, I love this flavor and I love these kind of vegetables, and I can put it together this way or that way. I can throw in some curry powder and put it over rice, or I can just use some tempeh. And so it to me, this whole approach to cooking kind of frees us up to be innovators in the kitchen and not just be slaves to somebody else's menu or recipe. So that's the spirit I like people to come to that book with, that it just opens up doors of combinations.
and it's so healthy looking. I know when I look at like a book like The Joy of Cooking and I look at the recipes, I don't want to make the stuff. It looks like it's so full of junk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That I
Yeah.
think, oh my God, I don't want to put that in my body. Uh, which is a complete different experience with Diet for a Small Planet and the
Well,
recipes.
thank you. Thank
Everything
you.
looks so healthy and good. Do we have any other comments, questions, whatever?
I see somebody.
Oh, do you?
Helen.
Who is it?
Helen?
Oh, Helen. Go ahead, Helen. Do you want to unmute? Helen, you have to unmute.
There it goes. Hi,
Right.
glad to be here. I'm a great admirer of you, friend, and read your book long ago. My question is about disinformation because that really has eroded trust. And as you said, we are in a crisis of trust. Could you respond about or elaborate on how we should be dealing with disinformation?
Well, I don't have a simple answer at all. I do know that I really encourage you. You can see on our website, you can get a copy, you could read the PDF called Crisis of Trust. And we are now uh, beginning to rewrite that, and we want to come out with a new edition of it. And that's where, I talk about the New Zealand example of they have a website where people can actually name what is wrong, what is uh, disinformation and harmful, that it could actually cause harm. And then in New Zealand, they're required to remove it if it meets those um, tests. And so I don't have a simple answer at all, but I do think the more that we do our own fact checking. That's one thing about, all the stuff on the internet, that to fact check and see who is saying this, if it's something that you're at all suspicious of its validity. Um, and and so I would love to stay in touch with you. I mean, if you go to our website, you'll get on our e-list, Small Planet, and as we go forward with our new version of Crisis of Trust, um, we hope that we can have more U.S. examples of how cities and states are stepping up, and so that's what I would ask, that you that take a look at it. And I found it just so encouraging that at least somewhere in the world that people, and Sweden is another example, uh, where they have a pretty sophisticated system, also in France. So if you get a hold of that Crisis of Trust and have suggestions, know that we're in the process of redoing it. And if you can add any questions or advice or sources, I'd so appreciate it. It's critical.
That sounds like a fun thing to do, friend.
Yeah, good.
To get involved in that. I'm saving the chat also so I can send that along. Everyone who's on the call and who registered will get the video tonight. Might be late, but you'll get it tonight so you can watch it again, and especially if you came in late. It looks like Mike, you have your hand up? Yeah, need to unmute.
Thanks. Yeah, so it's great to hear you. Love the idea of trying to bring in all the positivity. Have a lot of trouble with that and hope and everything. So it's great to get that out there. And at the same time, I'm kind of wondering what it's so to me, it's so almost beyond just beyond belief what's happening in the country. Just almost like inconceivable. I was wondering what you thought about this Bolsonaro in Brazil. Of course, it's the big orange man calls it a big witch hunt, and of course they tried to do that to me, but they couldn't do it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they're supposedly this guy's going to be behind bars for 27 years. I don't believe it'll happen, but they're trying to do that. He can't run again until 2060 or something, and he's already about
Oh,
70, I think. So, I mean, is there any chance of anything like that happening in this country is kind of part of my question. And do you think there's really going to be a free, honest, and fair election in 26, and that the Dems can actually change things here? Because I honestly don't believe he won the last election. I don't care who else thinks that I'm crazy for saying I don't believe he did. I believe so many millions of votes were thrown out that I
yeah.
truly don't believe he really won the election. But it doesn't matter now because it's all going forward. And hopefully if he could just sort of pass away quietly in his sleep. I don't know if you think Vance, or if anybody thinks Vance or anybody like that could continue this ball rolling. I kind of just get the feeling that it's almost too late for what's happening, and I don't want to feel that way. I want to find the hope that it's going to change, but nothing points to that right now. Nobody's, even though they're trying hard, it's just not turning yet. And I wonder if you think it will turn in the next couple of years. Thank you. I know it's a long question, sort of.
That's
Right.
fun to do.
Sorry, I just kind of went on and on. Anyway, thank you. I appreciate
Well,
what you're
I
saying
certainly
today.
have no simple answer. However, one of the things that we're doing at our institute, Small Planet Institute, is looking for for this document we're writing now about um, possibility. Looking at the U.S., our book is called Hidden Hope, is the title of the book we're working on. And so we on each area, like education, democracy, starting, where does the U.S. rank? And then we ask where the leading countries, who's the number one, and sometimes more than number one, and how are they doing what they're doing. So the more that each of us can spread the word that where I started, that the fact that we're 57th in democracy means there's so much we can learn from others because they're 56th that we can learn from. So I think that 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 just being able to articulate what is happening, and we're trying to please connect with our work, but trying to get examples not just from abroad, but here at state and local. And if any of you have any really good examples to share, I'm blanking at the moment. I know we have some ready in our drafts, but I think that human beings, they have to see other people like themselves um, making change that helps so much. Not many of us can be the first, the first, but and to try to get local groups going so that if you're not part of, fortunately, I have my little my little um, community here, but if you're alone, then whatever, reach out and just ask people, would you be willing to meet once a month? And we could say, okay, we're going to go to Indivisible, which is a great organization, or Common Cause, Democracy Forward, and see what they're doing and talk about what we could do here related to what they're doing. Because as a lot of people turned out for that No Kings march. Uh, I mean, it blew my mind in Boston. I didn't, it was just an enormous turnout. So I would just stress that don't, if you, I don't, of course, I don't know you, but all of us, just to find comrades, find buddies, democracy buddies who can, and maybe give each other a challenge. Okay, we're going to do one thing a week to turn our near autocracy into a democracy. So does that, I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm going to give an example, which we spoke about yesterday, Frankie, and that is the Mondragon cooperatives in Spain. And people, of course, have
Oh yeah.
heard me talk about this forever because we've led 13 seminars there and are going again next May. But they are hopeful. I mean, what they've accomplished, their country, the Basque region, which has its own parliament, works democratically. Their businesses are worker owned, they are democratically run. So there's an example of democracy and hope, and they've eliminated poverty. So all the things that we want, they've succeeded at, and we can learn from, which is why I keep going back there.
Oh, I'm so glad. That was life-changing for me, when I visited probably 20 years ago now. But it's when you say, my slogan is not possible to know what's possible. And then when you see people doing something you didn't think could be, and it's just so inspiring, and how it continues to be so creative and affecting so many people's lives. So Mondragon in southern Spain.
I'll put it in the, and I know that Ray has his hand up. Do you want to ask your question, Ray?
Yes, hi. Thanks, Francis. I just went to your website to try to look at that crisis of trust, and it's weird because it shows up as a book cover, but it won't let you click on it to find any information. So
well, I'll take care of that tomorrow.
I just letting you know, I was trying to look for it,
you.
and I didn't.
Wow.
But yes, I'm very concerned about, it seems like the whole ethos is disinformation. It's the, very Hitlerian, manifestation of a big lie into the truth on the ground. And I was very disturbed to hear that, one of the elements of Project 2025 was a directive, since they're pretty much running the show, that deploying the military into cities was a way to get people used to the idea of presidential power. So we're seeing that very much manifest right now. And those poor people of Chicago just didn't want their help, and so now they're heading to Memphis because that's a blue city in a red state. So, fun. So how do we, I guess I'm still struggling with how do we push back at people that just think that's the best thing since sliced bread to, get rid of all those crime-ridden places that only happen to be Democratic run.
No, I don't. I think that again, I'd repeat that just help people know that there are that we that in our the fact that we have such such a flawed democracy, we've got to explain that away that doesn't discourage people and just encourage people that there are solutions to those issues that other people are finding, and it means stepping out into your going to whatever local um, decision-making bodies and finding out how they're getting made, the decisions are made, and feeling connected and not so alone. And I always say that if you can just find one person who shares your passion and each and together commit to do something, that really helps so much because and then find another. And so I think that all of us, I don't have a simple answer to your question, but I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah, it's finding people to work with people, and there are some really good organizations around too. So there are lots of places we can plug in. I think we'll take one more question, and that will be from Lori. Go ahead.
Okay. Um, uh, Frankie, as always, you just are so entertaining and so knowledgeable. It's wonderful to see a woman in power. Um,
Oh
I
dear.
I just wanted to state that given today, I think one of the focuses, and I would hope that maybe you would be a voice to address this, is that as women are charged with families, young kids, trying to develop, really healthy foods, food styles, okay, or, accommodations for their kids, they're also challenged economically. And
Mhm.
how can you get the best nutrition for the buck? Okay. A lot of them are on very struggling budgets. And we see a lot of uh, a lot of people applying, as the food programs are going away for the eligibility of those families that are trying to make it, on their own. What could possibly be an avenue, okay, that you could direct? And this might be in the way of your website. Um,
Mhm.
challenges that, some of the young mothers and established moms, even grandmothers, okay, can help out in this arena.
Well, I think, just to help out by busting the mythology around meat as the essential. Meat is so costly compared to plant protein, and that the healthiest and include we have this protein fixation in this country, right? And we
Right,
grow up believing you can't get enough protein without meat. But actually, Americans eat twice the protein our bodies can use. We don't store protein. If we don't use it as protein, it just becomes energy, just like any other carb. So explaining to people that actually in um, eating lentils, and my favorites are black beans in terms of the legume family, but lentils and black beans and chickpeas and all of those, that world of really you can eat multiple meals off of 1 pound of that, right? And
yes.
and exploring, the tofu and tempeh world, and but just busting the idea that protein, um, under eating protein is your problem. It's not. If you're eating healthfully, you will be eating enough protein, I'm convinced. Does that help?
Yes, and
I
again,
too.
it was just the economic driver as prices are going up. They have a
Yeah,
tendency to maybe skip the fresh fruits and vegetables when they should be
I see.
economizing and including them rather than trying to get everything in the food pyramid, so to speak,
And also
on
switch
the table.
when you're not eating the meat, you can take that money to buy the
Yeah,
vegetables. It's just
Mhm.
right.
change where
And
you're putting
again,
your money.
and
But
I,
but
I
I but I
go
think
ahead.
it needs a message out there because we have so much counter training to that idea. And I know that you have that market, and I think that is something that I just wanted to express.
Mhm.
Good. Well, we're just about at the hour. So, Frankie, do you want to tell anything to us before we end the program?
Well,
Any-
I was just thinking um, that on my wall in my office, pretty much for the last 30 years, is the line of a Chinese poet, Zhongxin, who's it's very simple. It says, "Hope cannot be said to exist, nor can it be said not to exist, for it is like the roads across the earth. In the beginning, there were no roads, but when many people pass one way, a road is made." So I think each of us, we are making that road. I get teary when I'm saying this, and you never know who's watching you. And if you do something that, stretches your boundaries of comfort zone boundaries, in order to be heard and to try something new, whether it's a new message to a friend or a new recipe, um, that we can feel that we are contributors. And every time, I think that's how our sense of power grows. If we do one thing, we get gutsier and find, the other thing I love to say is find a friend who's gutsier than you are, who will push you. And that's been a great blessing for me to find gutsier friends and say, okay, you can do this. Because that's our social nature. And so we will become more courageous. And I'll just say that also the word courage, I love to, it comes from the French word for heart. And so I love it to say that when you feel your heart beating because you're insecure, that's really your inner applause. That's your inner applause telling you you're on the right way. So whether it's speaking out or just doing something you haven't done or writing a letter you're not sure about, go for it and feel that inner applause.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Frankie. This has been wonderful to spend an hour with you. Really enjoyed it, and I'm sure people on the call have. I see little hands clapping coming up on my screen. Um, Everyone will get the video tonight. It will be up on our YouTube channel, so you will be able to see it again. So again, thank you, Frankie.
Oh, it's wonderful to reconnect with you, Georgia.
I'm going to
Wonderful.
call you again so we can chat more.
Good, good. I'll count on that.
All
Thank
right.
everybody for participating. Thank you. You give me hope.
Great.